Hello, and welcome to the Dementia Download, a monthly documentary podcast covering all aspects of the dementia experience, brought to you by MDFR. We want this podcast to be useful for everyone in the dementia community, wherever you might be. Because we're based in Merseyside, though, some information, resources and services might vary depending on where you are. It's always a good idea to check with your local healthcare providers to make sure you're getting what's best for you and your loved ones. We'll also share some telephone numbers and websites towards the end of the show, and that should help you find more information. This episode will walk us through the emotions that can surface in response to a dementia diagnosis, ranging from denial and grief to relief and hope for the future. Nobody's journey with dementia is identical, but we hope the examples in today's episode from a healthcare professional and from people with lived experience offer information, comfort, and a deeper understanding of the emotional impact dementia and its diagnosis can have. The first person we'll hear from is Andi Jaeckel, who's a clinical psychologist working for the NHS in Merseyside and who specialises in dementia. She talks about the differences between emotions triggered by changes in the brain caused by dementia and those experienced in response to a dementia diagnosis.
I think one of the things to know is that the way that we experience emotions and the way that we feel we have control of our emotions can change as a result of changes in our brain. People don't necessarily think about dementia as having an impact on our emotions or feelings. It's more people think about it as how it changes the way that we think or remember. But that's not necessarily what you might even notice first. So something that you might notice that just happens as our brains change with something like a dementia or actually any kind of brain changes is that we might experience emotions differently. So one of the things that people can experience as their brain changes is something called apathy. People's understanding of apathy is like, well, it doesn't matter to me. It's not exactly the case. It's more that things may not feel, you may not feel as strongly about things as you would have normally. And so you may notice that, and people around you may notice that as well. And that's due to the physical changes in the brain. So with that one, you may notice that you're feeling a bit less motivated, or it's not as easy to get started with an activity as it might have been before. So something that, always was really easy for you, so I'm just going to get up and go out for a walk, may just not happen as smoothly. Also, people sometimes with that change lose interest in things that they used to enjoy. That doesn't mean that all of your interests are going to change and you're not going to give up all your hobbies. But it does mean that sometimes things that really kind of sparked or, gave you joy may just not as much now. But yeah, that's not to say that you won't still love the things that you love. It may just be a bit different the way that you experience them. Another thing that's really common when people's brain change with something like a dementia is that they can experience feeling low or feeling anxious. And again, that's not because you are depressed or you have an anxiety disorder. It's just natural with the way your brain changes, and it's not your fault. And, it's not like you need treatment for it necessarily. But people can experience just normally low mood or feeling worried or feeling overwhelmed. And people may attribute that to you've been given a diagnosis of dementia. I would feel worried or scared too, but it's actually not that. It's that changes in your brain are triggering those emotions. Sometimes people can feel a bit more irritable or frustrated. And what that might look like is just you get annoyed a bit more easily than you might have before. You might have been somebody who's always been unflappable. and now you're just feeling a bit more like, oh, that's getting to me now. So feeling a bit less tolerant. People can also feel like they get frustrated a bit more easily. So where something I used to be able to just kind of keep at it and be okay with it, or just kind of get on, now I may start to get a bit more annoyed a bit earlier. And this can happen just because things that were easy can now just take a bit more effort, and you're not expecting that. But also the brain starts to have a bit more trouble to manage the emotional responses that we're having. And because of that, it just feels a bit like it's come out of nowhere.
These are changes which can be misunderstood as symptoms of a mood disorder, particularly in people living with young onset dementia, who may be misdiagnosed with depression or anxiety before they receive an accurate diagnosis. They are actually structural changes in the brain, which can bring about behavioural changes, which in turn can change how people living with dementia are treated by others.
People may look at you and think, oh, you're not doing the things that you used to do before because you're just feeling too low to do them. But it's not that you're feeling low. It's that you actually just don't have that same kind of impetus or the same feeling of, I need to do this. So you may actually still get enjoyment out of it. It's just not necessarily coming as easily to you to get up and go do it. It can look a lot like depression. And so you really need to have a conversation with somebody, especially if somebody is saying, oh, maybe you need medication. You probably don't need medication to help you with your mood. You probably just need somebody to understand that maybe you need a bit more help to get started.
Next, we'll hear from Audrey, who's witnessed these emotional and behavioural changes firsthand, while caring for her husband, Tom. Tom was diagnosed with dementia in 2019, aged 75, and showed signs of the condition several years beforehand.
He was a kind gentleman, and with me he was wonderful. We had a good relationship, but he became agitated easily, and because he did jobs, he was still capable of doing little jobs or things in the garden, and he knew how to use tools, and he'd say to me, oh, go and get me that thing, and it's blue and it's metal, and he'd expect me to know what it was. And then he'd get annoyed with me, saying, you know what it is. And that was so unlike him.
While changes in the brain can change the nature of people's feelings, they can also limit the control they have over them. Our next guest is Pete Middleton. Pete is a dementia activist and writer living with Alzheimer's disease, who also appeared on our first episode. He noticed his emotional filter changing in ways that took him by surprise.
I become very emotional very easily now. I can burst into tears now sometimes if I hear some particular music that I haven't heard for a long time that resonates with me. It'll make me cry. Or it'll make me so excited, that I just want to, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and it's just wonderful. I can watch a movie and be brought to tears, and that would never have happened to me before. If I go at my daughter's wedding, in fact, my younger daughter's wedding, I had to leave the wedding because I was just not the wedding, but afterwards, I was just crying my heart out. People were coming up to me and saying, "Are you all right, people?" I didn't want to be the focus of my daughter's wedding. That was her day, so I had to go because I was just too emotional. It comes very easy to me now, and it didn't used to before, not at all.
As the brain changes, that ability to be as in control of our emotions just isn't as present, and we lose that. So it may look like just crying a bit more easily. It may look like people laugh kind of unexpectedly, or just react maybe more strongly than they used to. And that bit is just a change in the way that we control our emotions. So if I am my normal kind of healthy self, the way that I know myself to be, then I may feel like, okay, I feel a bit sad, but I'm okay with that. I don't necessarily cry. I might be at work and I don't break down, or I may find something funny, but it's maybe not the right time to laugh, so I don't. But if I got dementia, I may no longer be able to do that. So it may look like I'm more emotional, or I'm feeling things more deeply, and it may not be that I'm more emotional. It just may be that when I have that trigger, I actually go ahead and cry. And I think that can feel sometimes to other people who are with you as if it's kind of surprising or embarrassing or any of those things. And that's just because people don't always understand this about the brain. In some particular forms of dementia, so the ones that affect the front of the brain, so the frontotemporal dementias, people may say things more directly than they normally would have. So maybe they were kind of able to say things in a way that kind of came across as really soft or kind, but now might say things that feel a bit more direct or abrupt. The actions that people may experience or that people may do are, I guess, less filtered. So rather than checking myself, because that part of the brain, that frontal part of my brain, is what acts as my filter. So, are you sure you want to say that? Or are you sure you want to do that? That's not there now. And also people might find it harder to read social situations. So to understand what there's meant to do, people sometimes say, reading the room. That may not be as easy as the dementia progresses. It's not you. It's not you. It's the changes that are happening in your brain, and people around you need to really be much more understanding of that. So that's just something I think to keep in mind. It's not necessarily which emotions that you experience, but also the way in which you're in control necessarily of your reactions to them.
Another instance is the last holiday we had together, and maybe the altitude affected him, or it was just the dementia coming on worse. And, you have a tray in front of you that you pull down to have your meal on a plane. He called one of the cabin crew, and I thought, what's he doing? He said, this tray's not straight. I was so embarrassed. And he said, get somebody to look at it, because I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Laugh when I think of it. If I put my dinner on there, it'll spill onto my trousers. And the cabin crew was so kind. They were saying, okay, sir, I'm so sorry.
The development of new emotions, reduced inhibition, and sudden behavioural changes can affect not only how others view and respond to people living with dementia, but also their own sense of identity.
Another thing that people may experience, it's not a new emotion, but it's a reduced response to emotions. So people may be said to be emotionally flat. They're not reacting to things that normally would have mattered to them more. And that's me looking in as an outsider, or saying that person's struggling to connect emotionally. And there are a lot of reasons why that might happen, but that can be difficult for your relatives to see that with you, because they know you, and they know how you normally respond to things, and they know what would normally be something that would give you joy, or where you'd really feel something strong. So for them to see that changing, that can be a difficult thing for them to see. And also may not be something that you feel or are aware is happening. It's important to know that you're not changing as a person. So that you're in there and you obviously still care about the things that you loved and the people who you love and yourself, and all of those things are still in there. but the way that they're expressed and the way they're experienced by you now because of the changes in your brain are now different.
Now that we have a clearer understanding of how changes in the brain can influence emotions, let's consider the feelings caused by a dementia diagnosis.
Feeling afraid and feeling, really anxious and not knowing what to do with the information that you're given is really normal. It's really normal. And it would be the same whether it was a dementia or a different type of physical health illness, cancer, diabetes, anything like that, a mental health diagnosis. Any of those things would be totally normal to feel afraid and not to know what comes next, not to know what it means, to be concerned about losing myself or my independence. People can feel, it's the unknown. People are often told this is the progression, this is what's going to happen, these are the stages, but not always. I may be completely different depending on my genetics, my life, what's led up to this point, the access that I have to help, and who's around me. So I don't know what's coming, and that's anxiety provoking for anybody.
Of course, the emotional impact of a diagnosis isn't isolated to the person receiving it. It extends to family, friends and loved ones too. Nat Gavin was a secondary carer for his mum, Gina, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in her late 50s. He's also the producer of this podcast.
When my mum, Gina, was diagnosed, I didn't find out about it for, I'm still not sure how long it was after a diagnosis that I was told, but they had kind of given me hints that I'd not picked up on. She'd mentioned going to memory groups at a hospital. I was, possibly a little bit of denial on my part. But then when I did find out, it was my dad asked me to come and clear some of the stuff out of my old bedroom in their house. So I went round and was clearing stuff out of my old room, and my dad came in and sat down and told me that my mum had been diagnosed with dementia. I was initially quite numb, didn't quite know how to feel, and took it very badly initially. I went into a bit of a depression for a while. I think part of it is that I didn't really know a lot about dementia. My only experience of dementia was going to visit my great-grandmother in a care home when I was very young. And then my mum had always said that she took after her grandma and that she would get dementia. As far back as I can remember, she'd always say that she'd end up with dementia, and she'd say, just get rid of me. So getting that news and thinking it was such a massive kind of drastic thing definitely had quite a heavy negative impact on me.
People can feel a sense of sadness or grief, which is also, again, really normal. There's a theme here. It's all normal. Basically, whatever you feel is going to be a normal response. But the grief bit is when people say to me they feel a sense of loss. This isn't how I imagined my future would be. I've only just retired, or I'm not even yet at the point of retirement, or I'm a grandparent now, and this isn't how I imagined that would go. So again, this isn't necessarily in dementia, but it can definitely be a part of it. The other things that go along with something that we don't want to hear could be something like anger or frustration. All of those kinds of things, people can feel a sense of denial. So, okay, you're telling me this, but actually that doesn't seem to explain what's going on for me. It doesn't feel like it fits.
People's responses to diagnosis can be incredibly diverse. Audrey remembers the moment of Tom's diagnosis very clearly, an event that happened years after symptoms of dementia began to affect their lives.
It was upsetting to hear that he had Alzheimer's, but I already knew that he had dementia of some sort that we were living with from, say, 2016, when he'd admitted to our elder daughter that he couldn't remember things. But it wasn't a surprise, but it was still upsetting to hear it from a consultant. We were in the front room. It was Dr. Upton from Mossley Hill on a sofa. Tom was sitting next to me, and our Jan, our elder daughter, was sitting on a stool by the window. And the only reaction from Tom was, apparently, because I couldn't see it, I was sitting next to Tom, he turned to Jan and he raised his eyebrows, he went, and that was the only reaction we ever got from that diagnosis. The immediate thought in my mind was, how is he going to react? How is it going to affect him? Because I already knew, but he was in denial of anything apart from short-term memory loss. And I still don't know, I'll never know whether it was a case of he was trying to protect me, or because he could see what was happening and there was nothing he could do about it. So he was putting it to the back of his mind and just getting on with living, because he knew I would look after him. Because the first thing Jan and I did once Dr. Upton had gone was gave him a hug and said, look, Tom, you've had a diagnosis. We're here for you. And I said, I'll look after you going forward. I'm Team Tom, Yeah. And that's the way we lived. And he never mentioned it from that day.
The thing that people do, I think, expect when somebody has been given a diagnosis of anything is sometimes shock or disbelief. So, like, oh no, oh my God, really? Oh, what does that mean? This can't be happening. I feel numb, anything like that. But that might happen if it's an unexpected diagnosis. But I know that with a lot of people, it's taken so long to get that diagnosis that by the time they get it, it's not just a relief or makes sense to them, but to all of their loved ones. And they almost are at the point where they're like, yeah, of course. Yes, of course it is. And now it gives them access to things that they wouldn't have had without it. So for some people, a really normal reaction is a sigh of relief, and also a feeling of validation. So a feeling of, see, I told you. Like, I told you it wasn't me. I told you I wasn't depressed. I told you I wasn't being difficult. It's actually, this is a condition. This is happening to my brain, and I don't have control over that. But that's either of those are completely normal responses.
For Pam and I think the overwhelming emotion we had being given the diagnosis by the neurologist was a feeling of relief. And I could tell we were both singing from the same hymn sheet. We just smiled at each other and squeezed hands because, we were both thinking exactly along the same lines. At last, we know what's been causing all this uncertainty, because I've been 2 years misdiagnosed and I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew something was. So to actually be shown a series of scans that clearly shows that I have got voids around my hippocampus, absolutely classic Alzheimer's disease. Although it was a bit of a shock, it was a relief. Here's the thing: when you're given a diagnosis, that's just the beginning, isn't it? That's step one. And of course, your first emotion is the most powerful, I think. And for us, it was relief. But then you've got the whole process. It's like a grieving process, really, because you're also frightened. You're also angry. Why me? All of those emotions are going through you. I still didn't really know that much about the dementia process and what was in store for us. I was still a bit angry that I knew I couldn't work anymore. All of those things. So, and when I was thinking about what I wanted to say to you today, I thought, well, how do I sort this out? Because really the strongest emotion was, I've got to say it again, was relief. Because we now had a certainty And 2 years of uncertainty were over, and that's a good thing, because I had something concrete there. And when you've got a concrete diagnosis, then you can begin to see what's next. What can I do to mitigate things?
Something that isn't spoken about as much is that people may feel hopeful, and they may feel a sense of determination. And that is just as valid and just as normal. Feeling hopeful may be, okay, now I know what's going on, and now I can do something. I can live my life the way that I want to with this diagnosis, with this information, because we know so many people do. And so many people go on to do amazing things after they've got that diagnosis and can still make a difference and can still experience a lot of joy.
It might seem unusual for a life-limiting diagnosis to result in a fresh sense of purpose and hope for the future. However, many people not only continue to live meaningful, fulfilling lives after a diagnosis, but also embrace new opportunities and adventures throughout their dementia journey. One person who did exactly that is Gina Shaw, who was an influential dementia activist living with both Alzheimer's and vascular dementia.
I have been diagnosed with dementia, which I had suspected for some time, but when I did get the diagnosis, a little bit upset because my grandmother had dementia, and I just thought, oh, that's it, I'm going in a home. And then I discovered that wasn't necessarily so, because I have definitely found that life goes on with dementia, and actually I'm having a really good time and made loads of new friends, met lots of different people, and it's all been like new experiences. Who would have thought that you'd get new experiences after you've been diagnosed with dementia?
My dad and I went to like a post-diagnostic carers event, and it was just kind of covering a lot of the basics about dementia. But one of the things they were kind of pressing on us is that it doesn't mean it's the end. And they gave an example of one woman who was living with dementia, had been for a few years, and was still travelling the world, speaking at conferences. So I instantly thought, oh, well, that's what my mum will do, because she's always been an activist. And I thought that's what she'll go into. And then ultimately she did. She took on this whole new cause and became an ambassador for the Alzheimer's Society, and did indeed go on to travel the world and speak at conferences. So she continued to be an advocate and an activist and an organiser. And obviously not everybody, after a diagnosis, would be in that position if it's not in their nature beforehand. But I think it's just a good example that it doesn't mean the end of who you are. You can continue to be the person that you are.
Emotions surrounding a dementia diagnosis can be unpredictable, especially combined with the disorienting changes in the brain we spoke about earlier. Some people might benefit from talking therapies or medication, but there are lots of alternative techniques and strategies that can help before or alongside those interventions.
There are different things that we can do if we are really distressed by particular types of emotions, because sometimes we can be. One thing is to keep in mind that the emotions that you experience now are not the emotions and the same severity or depth of emotion as you will in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time. And that's just because as humans, we start to understand things differently. We have different relationships with the information that we're given, and it won't be the same in a few months as it is today. And that's with anything. And that's with people who don't have any kind of degenerative brain conditions or anything like that. Something that feels like it's never going to be okay again, in a few months' time, it is.
So, what can we do to help us through these difficult moments, months or longer, when things don't feel okay?
It can be really helpful to try to connect with the things that you value. It's not always easy to know what those things are, but you can do that with the people who matter to you the most. If it's your partner, your children, your best friends, whoever it is.
Of course, people find meaning in all kinds of different ways. It could be music, supporting our favourite sports team, gardening, fashion, creating works of art, and it can be spending quality time with people we love. Whatever we treasure can enrich our lives and improve our well-being. So, keeping these values alive can be an excellent coping mechanism through the most challenging times.
That's kind of the thing to keep focused on, that as your brain is changing and things are changing about you and things are changing in relationships and all of those kinds of things, that at the heart of it, you're still you and you're still somebody who cares about certain things, and you'll still be that person, and the people around you can help you to connect with that.
And he also suggests using the same coping mechanisms we've used for our entire lives. Things like distraction, getting out the house and into nature, visiting a friend, or using humour to get us through.
When something's upsetting to you, distract yourself. So just go do a change of scenery, go for a walk, go to a cafe, turn on the television, watch something if you feel like it. If you do feel like your sense of humor is something that you can always kind of rely on, then find ways to laugh. Find somebody you find funny, just talk to that person, watch something funny, do something silly. Whatever it is that might draw your attention for a little bit, might take the heat out of that emotion for you. And you'll find that a few minutes later, you don't feel it as strongly.
Mindfulness techniques can also ease distressing emotions, and we'll explore some of our guests' favourites in an upcoming episode. A common theme in mindfulness practice is to observe your thoughts and feelings, allowing them to move through you before letting them go, like water running along a stream.
It can help to give yourself a bit of distance from the thoughts that you're having and the worries that you're having. One of the ways that you can do that is with the mindful technique. It just gives you a bit of space. If you keep getting hammered by the same thought, like, I can't do this, or I can't cope, or what is this going to look like, or what's it going to be like, then just noticing that, but then letting that thought go. You don't need to hold on to it. If it is something that is important, it'll come back. But sometimes it's enough to just let that go, and maybe you won't come back to it because there'll be other things that you want to give your attention to instead.
If you're feeling overwhelmed and struggling to cope, don't be afraid to open up and share your feelings with a trusted loved one, or with a doctor or nurse. We'll also be including a helpline and links to further advice and support at the end of this episode. Pete and his wife Pam dealt with their feelings of distress and uncertainty together by seeking information and creating a plan for the future.
And so I knew then the next thing we had to do was get out of that office and go and talk to each other. And so the next thing we did was we went home, we made a cup of tea, and we sat down and we talked. And we realised we didn't know enough. So I phoned what was then called Dementia Connect from Alzheimer's Society. It's called a different name now, but it's the same thing. And I spoke to somebody there and told them I'd just been diagnosed with young onset dementia, and asked what next. And I must have been on the phone for over an hour, But the time just seemed to go by so quickly. I put us on speakerphone, and the person on the other end of the line just gave us so much useful information, and a shoulder to cry on, really. And after that hour, I felt as if I was tooled up with a list of things to do. So I got off that phone and I thought, right, what's that lady told me? Look, get some lasting powers of attorney sorted out, have a look at our wills, make sure they're fit for purpose, get our daughters round and have a good chat with our daughters as well, and the rest of the family and any friends, and come out of the closet and say, look, I've got a diagnosis of dementia. I'm the same bloke as I was yesterday, But you've got to realise now that going forward, things may change. But I'll still be me, and I'll still love you. And so we started ticking those boxes off. And that gave us a good sense of purpose because, the worst thing you want to do is sit around and feel sorry for yourself and grieve and moan forever. But if you've got a list of things to do, it keeps you busy and off you go. That burst of effort that we put in at the beginning did us a power of good because we skilled ourselves up about dementia as well. We learned as much as we could. We did the reading. We went on the chat groups and we did all the good things, And so another emotion, I guess, that came out of that was a sense of achievement. The fact that we both actually achieved something good. We got that all sorted out as much as we could. We've future-proofed our lives. And we did that in quite a short time. And we're still tweaking, of course, because you've got to steady the ship all the time you're sailing through the seas of dementia. Because what's the alternative? You give up? I've seen people do that. They go down the tubes in 5 minutes. They go from diagnosed to dead in a couple of years if they give up. It's like anything else in life. I'm 7.5 years into my diagnosis now, and I'm going strong. Why? Because I keep myself busy. I don't think about the things I can't do anymore. I think about the things I still can do, and I keep doing them. And that's the secret, I think, of living well with dementia. It's as easy as that. If I can do it, anybody can.
So, while a dementia diagnosis comes with plenty of challenges, it seems there's no universal reaction. We can't always predict its impact. But hopefully it helps us to remember that every response is natural. And with time, even the harshest feelings can soften into something more manageable. As our guests have shown, a dementia diagnosis isn't the end. In many cases, it can even be a new beginning. So, thanks to Andi, Audrey, Pete, Nat and Gina for their time and insight. For more information about services and support, you can contact the Age UK helpline on 0800 678 1602. Lines are open 8 a.m. to 7 p.m, 365 days a year. You can also find lots of valuable information about dementia at www.dementiauk.org and alzheimers.org.uk. The Dementia Download was brought to you by Merseyside Dementia Friendly Radio. This episode was presented by me, Roger Hill, with a script by Alisha Riley. This episode was produced and edited by Nat Gavin. The Dementia Download podcast is made possible by a grant from the National Lottery Community Fund and the Dowager Countess Eleanor Peel Trust. If you have any questions, suggestions or feedback about the podcast, please contact hello@mdfr.co.uk. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.